A few months ago, I binge-watched all of Dexter, and while I absolutely loved a large majority of the series, it did end poorly on two separate occasions, so after I finished New Blood, I had very little faith in the prequel series Original Sin. But to my surprise, the new spin-off was actually pretty decent. Not nearly the height of Dexter content, but certainly highly enjoyable. However, now that I've watched season 1 of Original Sin, my biggest takeaway actually has nothing to do with the quality of the first season or our lovable serial killing main protagonist. No, my biggest takeaway was that Harry Morgan is a horrible father. Now, in the OG Dexter show, Harry Morgan is actually quite an endearing presence because aside from a few flashbacks, he's not actually a real character. He's simply Dexter's conscience. The good angel on his shoulder, if you will. A sweet and fatherly voice in his head helping to guide our main character. Like in season 6 when Brian replaces Harry as the voice in Dexter's head for an episode or so, it was genuinely a feel-good moment when Dexter pulls over and opens the door of his car and Harry walks on in. It symbolized the return of Dexter's guiding light. But none of this is reality. This is merely how Dexter chooses to remember his adopted father. So it's easy to conflate this kind of moral compass that Dexter sees and talks to with the man that Harry Morgan actually was. And the prequel lets us see Mr. Morgan for the flawed man that he truly is. I personally view Harry as a bad father, perhaps even one of the worst in all of television, because he shows a history of flat out failing each and every child that looks to him as a father. His first son drowns under his watch. Harry was too busy drinking beer and watching a football game to realize that his son needed him. And I think this guilt that Harry felt for allowing his child to drown impacts how he handles every other kid in his life moving forward. When Harry sees the first signs of darkness within his adopted son Dexter, a normal response would be to get this kid therapy and seek outside help. But because Harry felt so helpless to save his previous son when he found him drowning in their pool, I think he subconsciously goes into overdrive to think of ways that he can save Dexter. He views Dexter as metaphorically drowning in his own darkness. Seeing his own mom get chopped up in front of him at only 3 years old sent him down a potentially dark path. But this time, Harry is determined to save his son. And on the surface, you could argue that wanting to help your son is a noble pursuit. But when you really think about it, Harry is not just trying to help Dexter. He's trying to make himself feel better. He's trying to make up for what he failed to do for his first son. And this is what leads to Harry failing Dexter. I think because he was determined to save his second son, he fails to look outside himself for proper ways of addressing Dexter's dark passenger. Harry is not a psychiatrist nor a therapist, so while attempting to take Dexter hunting and make him try to become a surgeon might have been great ideas in Harry's head in order to feed the dark passenger inside of Dexter and keep it at bay, these outlets don't actually address the problem. They simply attempt to feed into Dexter's violent nature in a way that will keep him out of jail. They are metaphorical band-aids for a wound that is gushing blood. Also, as Dexter says numerous times in Original Sin, Harry had already taught him the code at this point, which means that Harry never truly thought that hunting or being a surgeon would be enough to satisfy Dexter's dark nature. I mean, why else would Harry have taught Dexter this ridiculous code at such a young age? Again, I think this speaks to the fact that Harry feels like he has to be the hero and save Dexter, rather than admitting that he simply can't and trying to find Dexter real mental and psychological help. He decides to think of his own solutions, and this code that Harry comes up with destined Dexter to a life of being a serial killer. And even if you think that all the therapists and psychologists in the world would have never been able to get through to Dexter, and that he was always going to become a blood-hungry killer, Harry as a father still should have exhausted every possible option to avoid that outcome. But he didn't. In a lot of ways, he simply accepted what Dexter was and crafted him into a weapon. A weapon to do what Harry himself couldn't. And that's kill the scumbags who fell through the cracks of the legal system. Because if his son is going to be a monster, well, he might as well be a useful monster to Harry. I also think Harry Morgan fails Deb in a lot of ways, primarily through making her feel neglected. Because of all the extra effort and attention he puts into indoctrinating Dexter into the stupid code, his daughter grows to resent him. And honestly, rightfully so, because he doesn't give her nearly enough attention and nurturing. And we see this bleed into Deb's adult life as she, even years and years after Harry's passing, is still trying to make him proud, almost as if she's still vying for his love and affection, even though she knows she'll never get it. Just for one last point to sort of drive home my stance on Harry being a really bad father figure, the way he interacts with Brian also reflects really poorly upon his character. I mean, yes, Brian was clearly a troubled kid with deep-seated mental issues, but splitting Brian from his brother was the worst possible thing Harry could have done for the kid. I feel that he either should have made the effort to again seek the help of therapists and psychiatrists to try and mend what was broken within Brian, or he should have let both he and his brother go together into foster care. If Brian still had his brother by his side, maybe all the therapy might have actually been able to reach him, because I would argue that his obsession with making it back to his brother is what primarily drove him to violence. So when Harry confronts Brian and tells him that you couldn't be saved, Dexter could, I think he's chatting absolute bollocks. He didn't really try to save Brian, he gave up on him. And in reality, did he really try to save Dexter, or did he just turn him into an efficient serial killer? When Harry says things like, "I'm the best thing for Dexter," I have to really question if he's trying to convince Brian of that, or himself. Because while he might not have been the worst possible thing for Dexter, I think it is very, very clear that Harry was far from the best thing for him. And while he's a wildly fascinating character who in some ways, within the canon of this series, is responsible for all the incredible highs that these shows have given us, as a father, well, he's just downright awful, even if Dexter does remember him fondly. Well, if you made it this far, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Harry Morgan as a character. Do you think he was what was best for Dexter, or do you think he largely failed as a father figure to him? I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please feel free to drop a like and subscribe for more Screen Stories content. I've made a handful of Dexter-themed videos at this point, so a playlist with all of them will be linked in the description. Thank you for watching, and until next time, peace.